maybe you could begin with a brief introduction to Sound of Freedom. What can people expect when they watch it?
A film that will entertain them, a film that will take them to a cinematic odyssey into a dark subject matter, but through a lens of hope. And even though it explores a very difficult theme, it's still a magical experience, still a cinematic experience. It's a film. It's a film that audiences will enjoy, but at the same time, it will leave them in a state of reflection, but inspired. It's not a film that is going to hit you over the head with this theme. It's a film that will propose a conversation, a dialogue, social dialogue about something that is extremely important in our society.
Absolutely. Maybe you could just, take us back to where it all began, the making of this film, working on the script, because I know you sort of had the initial idea to work on something in this thematic area, but actually it evolved from that point to focus on this individual and loosely based on his life. So maybe you can tell us a bit about that backstory and how it came to be the film that we see now.
Yeah. So like you say, we were writing a fiction story, and on a research, it's a very difficult subject matter to research, because you also don't want to scar your own self as a writer. You don't want to see things that you cannot unsee. So, instead of doing a lot of research online, which is also very limited, we wanted to meet people and to kind of get experts' opinion, people that worked on the law enforcement and that work on crimes against children. And that led us to Tim Ballard. So when we met Tim, we wanted to download more information from him as an expert, but then later realized that his story was better than our fiction. And that's when we did a 180-degree turn, and we started talking about, what if we make your movie, your life story? And that's how we ended up here.
And tell us about your cast, and obviously right at the center of it, Jim. I mean, one of these, very enigmatic actors. He's actually one of my all-time favorite films, The Count of Monte Cristo. But obviously done lots of other things since then too. And casting that central role was going to be really crucial. So, how did you decide on your broader cast, but particularly your protagonist?
Yeah, I mean, that when you're casting a film, you go through it's a process. You make an offer, and it's big part of directing a film is casting the film, and you have somebody in mind. And for me, it was very important that the character look, because it was based on a true story, it's a biopic. I wanted the character to really look physically a lot like Tim Ballard. So in the beginning, I was just looking at actors that had the same physical and hair color and all the things, all these traits that look a lot like Tim Ballard. And obviously Jim Caviezel is tall with dark hair, so he was not on my list. But one day, as I was making offers, and it's just like anything, you make an offer, the actor is not available, or he just doesn't like the script, whatever reason that they decide not to do the film. I was about to make my other offer, and I get a phone call from Tim Ballard, and he said, "Hey, you have never asked me who I would like to play me." I say, "Okay, who would you like to play you?" And he said, "Jim Caviezel." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, one of the hardest part of my job is to transcribe all the videos of sexual abuse against children, because you cannot play those on court. You have to transcribe them. And that's the hardest part of my job, because you have to really be very detailing. So the sentence is greater, the more detail. And that's really hard, because, watching these videos, it just completely destroy your soul. And I have to rely a lot on my faith. So I wonder if maybe, Jim can take his fate and put it into the character. So I was like, well, I was a little hesitant just purely because of the looks. So I went to meet Jim, and when I met Jim, I realized that this story was very personal to him because he had already rescued 2 children himself. You know, he adopted 3 of his own kids from China. So we started talking. He started getting very emotional, and I saw his conviction and his connection with the story. That I asked right away. I was like, "Is it possible to dye your hair blonde tomorrow?" Literally tomorrow. It's just very important that you guys look alike. Otherwise, it's gonna be really hard. You know, I have the real guy next to me on set, and then the guy is gonna look different. It's just gonna mess me up. And he said, "Yeah, let's do it." So we dyed his hair blonde, and the minute we dyed his hair blonde, his eyes even became bluer because of, you know, his hair. And I just put him next to Tim, and he was like, boom. It was like a perfect match. I mean, it was crazy how his transformation. It was like, you know, I wonder how I would look with blonde hair myself. But it was crazy how you can change so much, you know. It was a massive, dramatic, physical change to the point that he looked a lot like Jim himself, like Tim himself, and that's how we end up. You know, it was beautiful because I love when the project also participates and picks the character. You know, it was one of those things. You know, I love it when it was not 100% me making the decision, because then you allow for what I call, you know, divine accidents, like Orson Welles said. You know, always let a little bit of the control go so these divine accidents happen. You know, that's a quote from Orson Welles, one of my favorite directors of all times.
And obviously, it is a difficult subject matter. What was your approach in that sense and working with Jim? And what might have been some of the really challenging moments, you know, on the shoot? And on the flip side, you know, what might have been some of the highlights?
Well, it was just a very difficult film, just because we had always, as an independent film, you always have limited resources, you know, funding, budgets, and we were shooting 6 days a week, working with children. Children can only shoot 4 hours a day. So it just becomes very, very difficult. But the one great story, there was one day where, you know, because Jim is obviously enough, we shot in Colombia, and one day he just got really sick, like hospital sick, and they were discussing to take him to the hospital. And that location I was gonna lose. It was one of the most expensive locations. I don't know if you've seen the film, but it's the scene where he comes out with a bucket, and the bucket was real because I convinced him to shoot. And this is when an actor really is more convicted, that his conviction is stronger towards the film than towards his own health. Now, I wasn't trying to, you know, we're all adults. You know, if he wanted to go to the hospital, he could have. But I'm also very persuasive. I was like, man, I'll rewrite the scene. I'll make you sick in the scene. I'll actually make you hangover. And if you need to throw up on camera, do it. You know, it'll be part of the whole scene. And he ended up saying, let's do it. Now we only, he said, I'm going to give you one or two takes per shot, per scene, per take. I said, okay, done. And we did it. A scene that I was going to shoot in 10 hours, I ended up only shooting it in 2 hours because he was literally barely standing up. But that conviction was incredible. And the reason if I would have lost that location, then, you know, we would have to shoot that scene somewhere else, and it would lose a lot of the production value. And we already had paid, you know, those kind of scenarios were kind of our daily bread.
And, you know, it's just perhaps a hard topic to talk about, but there has been some controversy since, I mean, it's been sort of following it slightly from afar because it was obviously out in the US before it's been here, but there has been some controversy around the film, some other like conspiracy type things connected with it. What's your take on all of that? Is that something that you think, well, actually that was never there in the making of it, and that's something that almost happened retrospectively? What's your opinion on all that?
Well, you know, it was in the beginning, it was a little scary when they start labeling you with and trying to associate you to what you just, I mean, the word says it, conspiracy theories. And what is a conspiracy? It's like there's no proof. So there was no proof to any of these accusations. But where there was proof that there was a lot, not all of them, you know, I hate to generalize, but there were some journalists that were reporting, they were very sloppy because they were just lazy. Because if they were doing just a little research, like for example, there was one they were saying that this movie was funded by one of these conspiracy groups, and all you have to do is, when was the movie made? That's very simple. It's all over. And watch the movie, because at the end credits you have the investors, and it's not small names. It's like saying the Rockefellers or the Vanderbilt funded your film. I mean, it's like very high profile public entrepreneurs that are very famous because of how wealthy they are. So it was just ridiculous at one point. I was just, waiting to say one day, it's like, okay, the Martians funded your film, So at one point, it was like, look, in the beginning, I did hurt a lot because I thought, it's for an independent film to survive labels like that from moguls. It's very, very hard. And I was just so excited that the audience came and defended the film, and they spoke for us. They are the ones that saved the film, because it's really hard to survive, a label like that. This whole cancel culture. It's if you're powerless, you can't cancel nobody. But if you're powerful and it's kind of like a bullying thing. It's like, yeah, how do you survive a massive network calling you names? It's very hard. So it was there was a lot of bullying. I would say it was bullying, because attacks. I don't mind attacks if we're one on one, but if you're like, if you're Mike, a giant or Mike Tyson against a 10-year-old, it's like, really, that's not a fair fight. And thank God for the audience. They're the ones that came back, and on the other side, not all journalists. There was a lot of journalists that they actually, I respect those, that they actually didn't even like the film, but they came out to defend us. They're like, hey, we're defending this film. We actually don't even care about the movie, but it's not true what they're saying. We just went to see it. There's none of that nonsense. So it was a very interesting phenomenon. But at the end, the film had 100% for 2 weeks on Rotten Tomatoes by the audience, and you can't beat that. And over 20 million people in America saw the film, and in all Latin America, we came out in every country. We're number one. So the audiences are really connecting with the film because it's a movie. It's a movie, and the audiences are calling it like that they love the film, even though it deals with a hard subject matter. But it's still a movie that you will enjoy. It's not a movie that it's hard to watch. It's a film that has all the same elements as any other film, that it's entertaining, but it offers the opportunity to start a social dialogue about the subject matter without being distracted with all this. Well, what things did happen in the movie and what things did not happen in the movie? It is a movie, and yes, did I took creative license? Absolutely, 100%. At me and every other filmmaker that does a biopic. You have to, otherwise it won't be a movie. It will be a documentary. The minute you have an actor playing somebody, guess what? That's not real, right? So yeah, you're fictionalizing things to explore a truth.
And I guess in that sense, what do you hope people will take away from it? Like you said, shines a light on some issues people might not know about, and starts a conversation, and which is just as important, and in addition to how entertaining it can be too.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what you might work on next? Have you got another project in mind or not yet?
Yeah, I have a movie coming out in theaters on March 8th, which is Women's Day, and it's a film about the power of a woman. In the late 1800s, she was an immigrant, came to the United States from Italy, and revolutionized New York, and built an empire as big as the Rockefellers. But with all of her resources, she put back into the streets of the world. She started in New York, opened hospitals in New York, but then she transcended into around the world, all the way to China. So it is and she was fighting. It was the antagonist in the film was systematic, and she was fighting all this institutions run by men, controlled by men, and she had to kind of fight that continuously. So it's a very inspirational story, and I'm very excited. March 8th, coming out, I think, worldwide. So it's going to come out hopefully around the world at the same time. So it's just around the corner.
International Women's Day, right? March 8th?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with me, and really best of luck with the next project as well. Can't wait to see that too. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Lovely to chat to you. Thank you. Bye.